what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it? I'm the Doctor. Only joking.
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
Only joking.
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
Small off-duty Czechoslovakian traffic warden.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
Only joking.
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
Alright dudes, it's time for another episode of It's Time to Rewind. I am known as Bubbawheat. Not the Bubbawheat, not first name Bubba, last name Wheat, just Bubbawheat. This season is Red Who, where I'm covering British sci-fi like Red Dwarf and Doctor Who, and joining me 3 million years in the future via the TARDIS is my guest Carl from Hersing Around. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How are you, Bubba?
I'm doing good. I am excited to get into this show and, just jumping straight into it, we are talking about Assignment 1 of Sapphire and Steel, which was the first serial of that show, and it originally aired from July 10th through 26th of 1979. And I know, I forget, I know that, I reached out to you to come on because you had already watched Assignment 1, but I forget, what drove you to kind of check that out?
Oh, so that's easy. Speaking of Hersing Around, David McCallum died, and we were doing him in an episode, and so I was like, well, hey, I'll check out Sapphire and Steel. I tend to like British stuff. I'm a little bit of an Anglophile, not like a hardcore one, but I watch a fair amount of British stuff. And I had heard about the show before, but never seen it, and so I checked it out and was like, wow, that was something. And matter of fact, I can't remember how I described it on the episode, but I'm guessing it was something like that.
Yeah, I had never heard of this show before. I just, I use, typically Robert Black's big list of time loops on IMDb, and it was looking through shows that I thought might be British, and he had 2 episodes of Sapphire and Steel on there, and so I decided to add this, and I started watching it just recently. It's at the moment, it's in the US, it's free to watch on Tubi. And that's where I watched it, and it is just so bizarre. It really just jumps straight in, and it barely gives you any explanation. This entire Assignment 1, which it's also kind of weird to talk about because none of the episodes or serials or stories, whatever you want to call them, have official names. A lot of them have been given names after the fact, but as they aired and as they were intended, it's just Assignment 1 through Assignment 6. And I believe that this one is kind of referred to as Escape Through a Crack in Time.
Yeah, I mean, the craziest part to me about it is that it was originally designed as a kids' TV show. That's insane to me because, especially Assignment 1.
Mm-hmm.
If I was a kid, that'd be giving me nightmares.
Yeah, the Assignment 1 especially. It's because it does really have the 2 kids involved, but it is basically a sci-fi horror show too, because it definitely has these horror elements, and you have the 2 main characters, Sapphire and Steel, and in the opening credits, it's it doesn't give you much. It just tells you about, there are certain elements and heavy elements cannot be assigned where the people exist, but medium weight elements, which I think that immediately bothered me because they call them elements. And then the 2 main characters are Sapphire and Steel, and neither one of those is an element.
Yep. Yeah, which I feel like everyone has complained about. Anytime I see anything about Sapphire and Steel, the complaints are because I guess there's a couple things that are elements in the list, but Sapphire and Steel aren't.
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah, the other weird thing is like every every initial episode of the assignments, just like you feel like you came in the middle of a story in some cases. This one a little less so, I'd argue, than the other one that I watched, but it's just weird. Like the kid just sitting there, and I don't know. It's an interesting thing. I mean, I like the intro. The intro is cool. Like it's like if you've ever watched Sapphire and Steel now, like you'll never get that intro out of your head, in my opinion, just because it's so.
Yeah, and it doesn't change throughout the entire run of the show. It's always pretty much exactly the same. This like low budget animation and just this booming voice coming at you.
Yeah. I think the last season they changed one of the elements at the end. But that's it. You're right. I mean, it's just this weird, and I mean, it's also late 70s, early 80s. It's not exactly for those of us
It's
in
almost
the 2020s. It's not high tech.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of kind of a British version of the Challenge of the Super Friends type announcer voice.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and the intro to me reminds me a lot of PBS in like the late 70s, early 80s. The look of it, because I feel like broadcast networks in the U.S. their intros were a little higher level than this at that point.
Like the other thing that just a slight, although this is a more modern annoyance, because this is a serial, and so the first 30-second, it's like you have just like the kind of 20-second crawl that's the Sapphire and Steel, and then it goes into the recap of the previous episode, and then you get the opening titles. Yeah. And Tubi does have a skip intro, but it only skips that first 20 seconds.
That is
Sapphire and Steel intro, and it doesn't skip the recap or the actual main titles.
Yeah. And the recap is like that weird thing that a lot of series do, where they basically just give you the last 30 seconds or whatever of the previous episode, I feel like.
Yeah, because it does, this is serialized, so it does often end in like kind of a cliffhanger or, some revelation. And I think that was, for the most part, done pretty well. And I guess, trying to describe what Sapphire and Steel is very difficult, because they don't really, I think they do explain it the most in this episode, because they do kind of explain what's going on, because we do have two children in this serial. We have like, a maybe 13-year-old boy who's kind of the main human character in this, and then he also has a younger sister that's she's kind of almost nonverbal for the first few episodes, and then she kind of slowly warms up to Sapphire and Steel. And like Sapphire and Steel are kind of two time operatives, I guess you might call them, and they are like interdimensional beings who have various powers, and they're kind of sent to investigate these time discrepancies that involve things that are similar to ghosts, but they're not technically ghosts. They're never really explained. They're just entities that are trying to break through time in one way or another. Like, is that? Do you have anything else?
It, yeah. I mean, and I guess the weird part is they're operators, but there's also these people that are called specialists as well, who help them. So that's kind of weird too. Like, there clearly was a plan in terms of like how this works, but it's very unclear to the viewer how everything fits together in a bigger scale. Like, I guess.
Yeah, in a way, like it does kind of remind me a little bit of Steven Universe, I would say, because Steven Universe is this show that is extremely bizarre and hard to explain to people. And in that one especially, like each episode is, very short. It's like 15-minute 15-minute blocks, so that's like 11-minute episodes whenever you have time for commercials. And they kind of dole out the world building very piecemeal. So if you just like happen to watch one random episode, you're like, what the hell is this? I don't understand anything. And then by the time you watch the entire series, you realize that this is a very deep and intricate and well designed worlds that they have, and they just drop the explanations very slowly and piecemeal. And I feel like Sapphire and Steel is similar to that, except it was done in the 80s and it also got cut short. I think partly because from what I read, it's kind of partly due to the popularity of the two leads, Joanna Lumley and David McCallum.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is they got really good actors for this type of show, in my opinion. Like that, and this show would not have been as good if they would not have had that quality of acting. Because it really, you need good actors to pull this type of thing off.
Mm-hmm.
So, and my understanding too was, there was some budget issues and like some kind of different stuff apparently behind the scenes. But yeah, the biggest issue being that, you're trying to get time for that with the actors. So I just, it's interesting to me just because of what we talked about, that there isn't like this large universe that you can kind of delve into. You're trying to figure stuff out as things go along. And I really feel like it fits the type of show it is, because the show is kind of this weird horror, ghost story, mystery kind of thing. It feels like a thing to me, not like because you can't really distill the universe or whatever. So it just
and I think it doesn't help that that Sapphire and Steel as characters are kind of like good cop and bad cop, where Steel, David McCallum, is like the bad cop. He's basically an asshole in the entire show, and he's always just like, go here, do this, do that, listen to me, tell me your name, just throughout the entire thing. It is like, I don't have time to explain, just do it.
Yeah, he's emotionally stunted is the best way that I can describe it. Like, he's very matter of fact, and just like even his affect a lot of the time is very just plain, and like there's nothing there, which is purposeful, obviously. And whereas Sapphire is more like, she's more, I'd argue, in touch with her emotions and that type of stuff, and is much more even keeled. And you're right, is the kind of the good cop.
And she's like the more kind of sensitive. Like, she has the, they have different abilities, and Sapphire tends to be the one that's, she has the more like time related abilities. Like, she's the one that's able to create the time loop in this assignment. It's mostly just brief. This is kind of why I chose assignment 1, because there's this moment where the kid goes to answer the door because there's a police officer. Since his I guess we haven't really talked about the plot. What it's about. Like this first assignment, basically it's this family and the parents kind of disappear, and then Sapphire and Steel show up and deal with these two kids whose parents have I guess been lost through a crack in time. And then the entire it's like split into this one's 6 episodes, I believe, and
yes.
And it's just them kind of trying to get their parents back. And I think in the second it's the second episode, that the kid is trying to go to a police officer to get help, because, this is like I guess a small suburb. And so he knows, like, personally knows the name of the police officer, and the officer goes to the door, and then Sapphire kind of creates this time loop where this, 5 to 10 seconds keep repeating. The officer opens the door and says hello, and she's like, "Well, I can keep this up as long as you want, until you trust us and work with us and not the police officer."
Yeah, because if I recall right, the previous episode, the kid had called the cop, but the cop hadn't shown up yet. And then the cop shows up at the door. And yeah, I mean, that describes it perfectly. Because the thing is, when Sapphire and Steel show up, like, the thing I like is nobody would trust these people right away. And especially the way they act. So the kid doesn't trust them, and which is completely understandable. I mean, they basically forced their way in the first episode. They like show up at the door and just like, "Hey, we're here to help." So it's understandable that the kid is not sure.
Yeah, and then whenever we jump ahead to the fourth episode, we have the introduction of Iron as the, kind of the special guest character, or Lead. Yeah, that's
yes.
what it was. And he just literally breaks down the door, and the kid's like, "It's a giant is coming," and then as a viewer, it's like, no, that's just a black guy.
That was,
maybe he's a little bit tall, but I don't think he's more than like 6'2", maybe 6'3".
Yes, he has a very deep voice. But and he's kind of like, Sapphire and Steel are very serious. He's more like the fun one of.
Yeah, he's constantly laughing throughout. Throughout the serial.
And the other thing they do, which I'm never a big fan of, and this is huge, especially in the 70s. I don't know what it was about the 70s, but the way that they use the two kids, the male and female kids, is the total sexist kind of thing. Like the girl, she cries, she whines, she's like very childlike, even for somebody her age. She screams, that type of stuff. The teenage boy is kind of like trying to be the man of the house thing. And so I thought it was a little tropey, especially, again, it fits in, like, if you watch a lot of 70s TV, this is very similar, regardless of whether it's British, American, what have you. But the other thing that I thought, I don't know about you, but like, I don't want to ever hear a nursery rhyme ever again after the freakiness of the nursery rhyme stuff in this, because it's all built like the sound and audio, which is one of the things I absolutely love about Sapphire and Steel. And Doctor Who's kind of like this too. The audio work on the show is really good, especially for the time period.
I think the big problem that I had was, that on Tubi, this show didn't have subtitles available. So I think that, I might have missed things here and there, just the way I was watching it. And also it's very dark. So I think especially in the because I watched, there's 6 assignments. Assignment 1 is 6 episodes. Assignment 2 is 8 episodes. 3, I think, is 6 episodes. 4 is 4 episodes. 5 is 6 episodes, and then 6 is 4 episodes. So they kind of expand and contract. And I did watch assignment 2 and assignment 4, which I was recommended assignment 4 as being the best one. And I agree, and I think maybe I'll talk about that one a bit in our next episode. But assignment 2, the kind of time being or whatever it is that they're fighting is called the darkness, and like I practically couldn't watch it during the day because of the glare from the windows. It's like I couldn't see what was going on half the time because the show is very dark.
Yeah, I mean, it. A matter of fact, I like, if you ever watch Dark Shadows, this show is darker than Dark Shadows, and dark is in its name. Yeah, it definitely is, and part of it is the effects. They need it to be
Mhm.
dark at times because the effects. But yeah, I can definitely say I never felt like I needed subtitles. But again, I was watching, especially the first time through. The first time I watched both seasons. This time around, since we were doing this podcast, I rewatched one, and I didn't need to be like every second watching it because I'd seen it before. I
Mhm.
just to remind me of stuff. But uh, it definitely is. I don't know how to describe it. Like there's definitely like little stuff that's easy to miss at times, depending on which episode it is. Other episodes, like that was my thing with this one. I felt like it could have been 4 episodes instead of 6.
Mhm. I felt like I do agree that there was a lot of just kind of filler moments. I mean, the whole premise, and again, it's never really explained very well, but it's like anything old kind of draws out, old for the time. It's they kind of explain it as being out of time, so it's like anything really old, and like after Sapphire and Steel come in, they're like, get anything old out of this room, and then they bar off the room where the parents disappeared, and it was the saying of this nursery rhyme, which I did also notice. I think it's interesting that because it's they do Ring Around the Rosie,
Mhm.
and the it's a slightly different version that I remember as a kid. Uh, that's let's see, I don't have it in front of me, but like the one I'm familiar is Ring Around the Rosie, pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down, and this one was like slightly different. Instead of ashes, ashes, it's a different verse.
Yeah, and I can't remember because she does it a couple times, and there's another nursery rhyme. There's at least one other nursery rhyme, um, and
Yeah, the
there's
one that kind of brings in these ghost these after images of these medieval soldiers.
soldiers. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it is just there's just these bizarre things, and it's very clear that in all of the episodes I watched, both this season and the other season, I mean, clearly things from the past that are showing up, times messed up, they're trying to fix it. Like that part is very clear. It's
Mhm.
everything else that is that is unclear.
Yeah, like at one point, they these time beings come out of the room that they had boarded up, and they're represented by discs of light, like basically like a little narrow spotlight, just kind of going around the room. And then at one point they kind of hide inside a picture, and then they draw Sapphire into the picture, and so it's like a painting of a cabin in the woods, and then she's physically in the cabin. And that whole scene is, again, it's so weird because Sapphire and Steel seem to know exactly what to do, and Steel is like, don't move, don't you like look around, but then don't move. And it doesn't he doesn't explain why it's bad to move. It's like they know what's going on, and then as an audience, you're like, I don't understand any of this.
Yeah, no. And then she tries to get herself out, and it doesn't work because she can't focus. Like that part was weird too. Like I didn't understand what wasn't working. Um, but yeah, there is constantly a lot of stuff that just is not explained in any manner that you
Yeah,
kind of have to
and
read in. And again, maybe that's the point, I guess. Um, I mean, from an overall perspective, if you were telling this around a campfire, you could do it pretty easily. You just would probably leave out stuff that would confuse people. Like there's ways I feel like to tell this story if you don't have the visuals of it that you could tell pretty well, but you'd have to leave a fair amount out because it would just confuse people.
yeah, and then like the next bit is that Steele goes downstairs into the kitchen and gets this chest freezer, and then he takes everything out of it, and then he like opens up the the electrical components, and then apparently he like makes it so it gets even colder. I guess like supercharges it, and then they kind of explain that he's frozen himself to near absolute zero, and he uses that to freeze one of the time entities that was in the picture, and that's how he releases Sapphire, and then he traps the time entity disc of light inside the freezer, which it escapes like 2 episodes later, which again that they don't really explain how or why it escaped. It just did. And then we have this these moments. I think it starts in like maybe the 3rd episode where the time entities kind of pose as the child's father, and or first it's the voice of the mother like telling the boy to just let them out, and then they convince him to start singing the second nursery rhyme, the one that's kind of calls in the soldiers, which the images of soldiers kind of break down the boards, except they don't because in the next scene the boards are still there, and yet whatever they did allowed the time beings, the discs of light, to escape.
Yeah, and the other weird part is, which there's 2 weird things with the pulls of light to me, like, because kind of at the end I almost feel like there was one entity, so why are there 3 pulls? That was weird. And the other thing in this is let's burn books. What was that about? Like, I was like, whoa, why are we burning books? I mean, I get it for the story, but like, they're literally like pulling pages out of his nursery rhyme books and just putting them on the stove and like, let's burn them.
Even though they're foil because that the child remembers the nursery rhyme. It's like you can't burn it out of her memory.
Right, which is good. Like, I'm like, that's a good message, but I'm like, why are these entities, like, what's the point here? And that's part of the weirdness of it all. Like, they're trying to do all this stuff to make it so things don't get worse, or that like they can figure out once they get the old stuff separated or whatever, but it's just like, I don't know, it's just weird. It's a weird way to solve the riddle, I guess, is kind of.
Yeah, and then the episode kind of, I guess like the climax going into the ending of the episode is again the entity that escaped out of the freezer turned into a visual representation of the boy's dad, and again like it kind of conscripts him into working for them and trying to say that turn him against Sapphire and Steel, claiming that they're the enemies. And then he brings the boy down into the basement, which is where the cornerstone of the house is, which is the oldest part of the house, because they keep explaining that the oldest stuff is where they have the most power. And so being in the basement near where the cornerstone of the house is where they would be the strongest. And then they pull the boy into the past, which was where when the house was first being built. And it's the UK, so being American, it's like, yeah, old is like 50 years, but in the UK it's like, yeah, this house has been around for 300 years.
Yeah. In the U.S., especially, like if you live in the Northeast, maybe not so much, but definitely in other parts of the country, you're right. Like 50 to 100 years is like, seems like it's really, really old. Well, and the other weird part with it is like they make this intimation that some of this has to do with Oliver Cromwell, which is a British government leader who did some not so great stuff. And the soldiers worked for Cromwell, and that they were coming to do something at the house. Like there's some intimation of that, but then like that kind of just goes nowhere unless I missed something. Like,
Yeah, it seemed like the implication whenever Sapphire was stuck in the painting, and then the soldiers that we keep seeing were coming in, and it looked like they were about to hang her.
yeah, yeah. Like that's like my intimation was there's an older guy, this older woman, and then the two soldiers, and I'm like, how do they all fit together? The older guy, maybe he was the one that built the house, but you're never like you never are quite clear as to any of that. Even after the end, I'll let you explain what happens at the end, but like I was not like I got the old part. That was they kind of bashed it over the head with that, but
Yeah,
everything
it
else
feels
just
like it feels like they're pulling from the history of the house, but we only see glimpses and
right.
like after images, and the fact that they're being kind of controlled by these entities. That it's never really clear if they're just recreating events that happened in the past of this house. Like, they kind of implication that maybe there was a lynching or a hanging, like a
Right,
witch hunt
right,
or something like that, but it's not clear.
right.
It's just very vague and just kind of barely mentioned.
Yeah. Which I mean, in total, like it kind of makes sense, but it does like as you're going along, like I feel like and this was my thing with both seasons that I watched. Like after it's all done, it kind of makes sense. Like you get
Mhm.
where things went and that type of stuff. But as you're watching, you're like trying to figure stuff out. And I kind of realized after watching the first assignment a while back that like part of the idea is that you just need to go with it and not try and figure stuff out because
Yeah, a lot of it is more about mood and tone
yes,
rather than actual plot.
yes. Um, and the other cool thing that I really like, speaking of what I brought up before, the sound and kind of the visual stuff, is what they do with the clocks in this series. Um, in the assignment one, because the clocks stop, and that's part of the idea is that time is stopped and like all this weird stuff. And I do like that. The use of the clocks and that type of stuff, because when you don't have a special effects budget and that type of stuff, using what's kind of there, what's cheap, that type of stuff, and using it effectively is really the best way to like bring out the kind of the horror and mystery elements of things.
Yeah, and I think another interesting moment was going back to whenever the time entity took on the appearance of the boy's father, and came out of the freezer, and as he kind of escapes with the boy, they have to move past Sapphire and Steel and his sister who are in the kitchen. And the way they do that is they like kind of go back in time like a few hours, so it's like they're in a different phase of time. And because like earlier in the scene there's this whole mess whenever they're trying to burn the books, and then the the time entity is like trying to stop them, so it's like creating this whirlwind and trying to where one page with one of the nursery rhymes is like flying around that they're trying to catch. And then whenever the boy kind of comes through the kitchen with the entity posing as his father, he's like, oh, the kitchen's clean.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, to me, you're right. That's a great kind of way to work around your ability to create certain things. Um,
And then the way it ends is the time entity goes takes the boy into the basement and then traps him, similar to the picture, even though there's not any picture of when the house was first built. But I guess just because of the power of the cornerstone, that they bring the boy to when the house was first being built. So there's just kind of a corner of the basement wall. And again, because he was there whenever Sapphire was trapped, he kind of knew not to move or anything. And then he's kind of speaking through time, and I guess partially telepathically too, because another thing that Sapphire and Steel have is they have the ability to communicate telepathically with each other, which is kind of useful. And there is, and so everybody is down in the basement trying to talk the boy through what to do. And then at one point, the boy kind of becomes possessed by the time entities, and they're posing as the boy. And he's like, I defeated them. It's come here.
Here,
like, trying
yeah,
to lure
come on
them.
in.
And then they don't fall for that, and then they do eventually trap them. Which it's been a little while since I watched the first one, because I think it's been 2 or 3 weeks now, and I watched a few other assignments, so the details of how exactly the end, they solve everything at the end is kind of lost to me right now.
Well, Led comes in and picks up the cornerstone and destroys it with his strength or whatever. Like, he literally pulls it out and then just crushes it. And that seems to be what solves everything, because then it then moves to the boy sitting at the table, right, which is the scene right at the beginning of that serial. Because if I recall right, the first shot of the first episode is the boy sitting at the table. And so you get that same shot, yet the clocks are now working. And then eventually there's kind of like, it goes up to the parents are sitting in Helen's bedroom reading the nursery rhyme book or whatever. So the assumption is that by destroying the cornerstone, that everything is now back to normal. Like, the time is back to the way it's supposed to be. Everybody's
and then there is like the little coda at the end where the boy leaves the room and he does like see Sapphire, and she gives him the the final send off.
Yeah. So, I mean, I really like the couple things that you mentioned that I really like is the telepathy. They don't overuse it, at least in my opinion, because in a lot of shows when there's telepathy and that type of stuff, like, it just gets used too much. Like, it has to further the story, in my opinion. And in this case, I feel like they do that.
They basically only use it whenever Sapphire and Steel are trying to say something that they don't want anybody else to hear.
Right, which is when exactly. So it's used purposefully, I guess is what I meant. And then I really like how they end. Like, the ending is perfect to me in terms of this is how it should go. Like, time stopped. The kid was at the place. When time resumes, the kid's at the place, time resumes. Like, that's exactly how your assumption would be it would look. Just like the time loop, right? The time loop should kind of look the same. So when time restarts, it should restart from the moment that it stopped. And so you get everything in terms of how they shot it. They did it the way I would want it to be done, I guess is what I mean.
Yeah, although I don't, I also don't remember if, and I'm not sure if it was addressed whether or not the implication was whether whether Helen remembered anything that happened or not, because the boy clearly did.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't remember from the scene at the end there whether there's anything that would make you think she remembered, though you would assume she would because Rob clearly did. So, yeah, I'm not sure. He was the main protagonist, I think, the way that they wrote it. So
he's like the main human character, because it seems like for the most part, every story has like at least one kind of human character,
right?
That's I watched I guess 4 out of 6 of them, and they all had it like the one kind of human character that they're all interacting with,
right?
And then I did want to talk a little bit about assignment 2, which is the longest one. It's 8 episodes. It's the railway station, and I think that one I enjoyed it. I do think that it went on a bit too long, but I think it was much better than the first one. I think it really captured the the creepiness and everything, and it's they go to this railway, this basically abandoned railway station, and the human character is this old man who's like a ghost hunter, like kind of a typical ghost hunter. He's got like the recording devices. It's late 70s, early 80s. I guess that one would have still been 79. And so he doesn't have like the EMF reader yet, but he is kind of that type of ghost hunter where he's got like the cross. And at one point he does a seance with Sapphire and Steel, and Steel's like, what is this bullcrap? Well, I guess we'll try it your way. And the ghost hunter guy is telling him, you must not break the circle, and all this. And they're dealing with these various ghosts from different time periods that are all trapped in this railway station. The main one is like this World War I soldier, and I think it was maybe it was World War II, because I know like the I guess like the resolution of it is that they found out that he was killed like 11 minutes after the 11 because because there's a point where there's like 4 11s, and they're like, well, that doesn't make sense. Why? I thought it was the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, and he apparently was killed 11 minutes after, accidentally killed 11 minutes after the the armistice was signed.
Got you. So then it is World War One then.
Okay, yeah. But then there's also like these three workers that are trapped in a submarine that's running out of air, and there's this World War II pilot that was crashing, and they're all kind of being controlled or like enticed by this time entity known as the Darkness, and the whole thing is really interesting, and I think it's worth watching. And like there's this whole creepiness, and in that one I think they use darkness very effectively, because there's times whenever they're talking with the ghost, and like they're trying to find more information about these the different ghosts and everything, and they're being resistant, and Sapphire ends up kind of possessing / being possessed by the woman that loved the World War I soldier, and kind of sent him off whenever he went to war. And there's definitely these moments where they are like in a spot, like whenever they're doing the seance and everything, and like the background kind of slowly fades out as it's being consumed by the darkness, and it's really done. It's really, I think it's creepier than the first one. It does take its time, but overall I liked it better, and I do think that one's worth watching.
Check it out.
But I guess, do you have anything else to say about Assignment 1?
No, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that I can think of with Assignment 1. Again, it reminded me a lot of like a ghost story, with some weird elements, like some weird sci-fi elements mixed in, and
Mm-hmm.
that type of thing. But it very much reminded me of that kind of thing. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else. The time loop was interesting. It was a typical time.
Even though
loop,
it was like a small part of the serial.
Yeah.
It was only a few minutes long, but it did exist, so that's
Right.
why I had to cover it.
So,
All right, well, thank you for joining me, and we'll be back with you next week to talk about Assignment 6. But before we go, why don't you take a moment and let people know where else you can be found?
You can find me. I guess that's a good question. Where can you find me? As Bubba said, I'm on one of the co-hosts of Hersing Around, our rabbit hole podcast pod about dead celebrities. We just dropped an episode where we talk about Richard Chamberlain and Val Kilmer. And Hersing Around Pod, you can find it on Blue Sky, X, Instagram, like on all the socials. I also tend to be on Rabbit Hole's book club podcast, Picks and Conversations, fairly regularly. And me personally, you can find me at Carl Putnam at bluesky.com and or whatever the end of Blue Sky is. I can't even remember anymore. And I'm also on Instagram, same under my name. And yeah, that's really it.
And as always, I am Bubbawheat, and you can find me everywhere where I'm at Bubbawheat on all social media. I'm most active these days on Threads if you want to keep up with, what I'm doing in all my various podcasts. And we also have a Facebook group. It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group, and you can join that and have discussions about episodes as they drop, and also be informed of what I'm covering in future seasons, and also memes and discussions about any other time loops in across media is all welcome there. And until next time, smoke me a kipper, and I'll regenerate before breakfast next week.